Welcome back to the Purpose Over Profit podcast. This week, Chris and I had Ruby Sweeney on, who is just a bundle of positive energy. She's in the events management space. She runs a business called the Events Hub. And yeah, effectively, her role has been, and her whole career has been about bringing communities together, bringing people together to organise fantastic events. So it's been great for both Chris and I, who've maybe had a bit of insight into event management, both kind of being involved in setting them up, but also on the other side as a client. It'd been great just to understand, how do you do that excellently? How do you do that really well? And actually coming back to the topic of the podcast, purpose over profit, it all comes back to purpose, all comes back to strategy and how your internal events should be right at the center of what you do. So it was great for Ruby to talk us through that, her process for working with her clients. And yeah, I'm sure you're going to get lots and lots of value from it. Enjoy. So welcome, Ruby, to the podcast. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me today. It's great to be on.
And how are you?
I'm good. I'm actually starting to wind down a little bit, which is quite nice. And just looking forward to sort of planning for the new year and see what's ahead. So yeah, all good. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of feeling that myself. I'm doing a couple of goal setting workshops at the moment, and that is very much front of my mind. But it's quite nice. It's quite a nice time of the year to start thinking ahead to next year and full of positivity and feels like a clean slate sort of thing. So good. So
I was going to just jump in there, Daz, very quickly. There's something to be said actually about taking the time out as well, because it's very different than the weekend when you've got your own time. So I know you've got young kids as well, Ruby. So you can have that balance when you've got that period off to kind of shut off, but then take a bit of time for yourself, spend time with the family, and actually let your mind go somewhere else and look to the future as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what it is. That's what I think, Chris, is quite nice about the end of the year, because see, if you go off in the summer, everybody's off at different times. And so there's still quite a lot kind of coming through, or a lot to catch up on when you get back after your summer break. But I think towards the end of the year, people are really it's all about switching off. It's that time of year sort of weather-wise as well. And everybody just wants to focus on their families. And then when you do carve that bit of time for yourself or for your business, you're looking at kind of the planning ahead, which is quite exciting, I think. And it's just, I already kind of feel in my head that I'm kind of there, I'm winding down. I know it's only early December, but I'm still kind of getting there in my head, which is quite relaxing. It's quite nice.
Yeah, no, I totally get that feeling. I think me and Jill had said it would probably be next week, like try and get as much done as possible next week, so we can take that time, because it's an interesting point about summer with different people being off at different times. But I know I struggled with just taking the time with the kids. Like, I got into business so I could spend that time with them, but then I got there and I went, I need to bring more revenue in. I need to chase down more leads, and I've got more networking I need to do, and it all became a little bit exhausting for me. So I did recognize this Christmas, I'm definitely taking a good couple of weeks off.
Good for you, Darren. Good for you. That's the trouble, though. It's also when you're working for yourself and you're running your own business, you don't have an employer paying you holidays. So if you're taking that time off in the summer, you're also conscious of the fact that you've got to have some kind of residual income or something coming through so that it covers you for your time off. And it can be quite difficult, whereas I think at this point of the year, the time that I'm taking to reflect on myself and the business and personal development and other things just means that I'm kind of ramping up for the new year. And I kind of need that, at the point where I need to be doing that, where I've got to be doing that goal setting, like you say, for the new year, and looking at each of the quarters of the new year and what's going to happen when. And I work in the events world, so we're always kind of working ahead, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year. So it's really just taking stock and just, coming back into that space, but recognizing that you need that space to plan ahead.
Yeah. And it's been great. It's probably a poignant time for you to maybe introduce yourself a bit to the audience, but you've alluded a bit to it there, but it's been great. You're in the events industry, obviously. It's been great to see. I think we met maybe about a year ago, but it's been great. Kind of the COVID, there was a bit of a COVID hangover. We're in virtual space. We were talking off camera there about Zoom fatigue, or I was at least. But it's been great that we're out in person meetings, and I've just seen like the amount of, you just seem so busy at the moment as well. So it's great that we've been able to get you on at this time as well. But yeah, do you want to just give a quick introduction to yourself and what you do, Ruby?
Sure, Darren. Yeah. So I run the Events Hub, and what we do here is that we are taking away the kind of the headache and the stress and the time that it takes to put on a really great event or a great experience. And that translates in our world as conferences, AGMs, summits. It can be a corporate golf day or a company celebration, but generally we work in the B2B space, and we're working with a lot of busy directors or leaders who have to put on or choose to put on an event, but they don't want to get involved in the day-to-day event planning. We also work with specialist consultants who could be business coaches, it could be in marketing, it could be branding, but they don't do events and they don't want to do events. So again, we would partner with them to deliver the conference, event, or webinar planning with them. And then we also work with maxed out teams. So we tend to find this in sort of public sector or SMEs, is that you've got a small team of people and they already are at capacity, and then somebody lands either the AGM or an event on their desk, and suddenly they're kind of like, where am I going to get this time from, and where do I have the skills to even, where do I start? And the sort of trigger for me during the pandemic was that a lot of organizations were saying, well, we've got to run this webinar, or we've got to put this exhibition online, and they were absolutely petrified, and they just didn't know where to start, and they're just kind of confused, and there's all this sort of uncertainty and chaos around them, and they just needed someone to almost kind of like show them the light, kind of say, right, this is how you would plan a webinar, or this is how we take your event online. And so the pandemic has been, I guess, an opportunity for us in the sense that it allowed us to try new things as a business, but also for me personally, it pushed me out of my comfort zone, because I was someone, I just very happy being in my comfort zone, very comfortable being comfortable, and then suddenly kind of pushed into this world of event technology and taking things online, which I just wasn't accustomed to, and it's not really my thing. I'd kind of say I'm one of these dinosaurs, I have an old iPhone and all that kind of stuff, so I'm not really kind of up to speed with tech and gadgets and stuff. But the pandemic meant that I decided that I had no choice to push myself, to push the work that we were doing, and to push our clients really to try something different, to try something new. And I think the opportunity kind of came from that it gave us the chance to experiment and say, look, why don't we put this event online, but we're going to have to halve the agenda time, and reevaluating a program or the sort of the running order of the day or whatever it was, so that we could be successful online. And the idea of taking events online at the time, in sort of 2020 and into 2021, was that we wanted our clients to have certainty that their events were going to happen, and they knew that it was going to take this shape and this form, and it was going to go ahead. But essentially, kind of, I guess, coming back to what we do is that we deliver conference and event planning as a service, and to all those different personalities, avatars that I explained earlier. So it's directors, leaders in professional services, in financial services. We work with a lot of scale up or high growth SMEs. We work on the other side in public sector as well, with associations and membership organizations. So these are all kind of the typical sort of mid-tier businesses or organizations that have AGMs, they have conferences, they have a stand at a trade show, or they have a company celebration, or they want to put something on for partners or sponsors, or have a reception or a dinner, or et cetera, et cetera. So we are bringing the strategic side of it, looking at what purpose, which is great for this conversation, because that's what the name of the podcast is. We're bringing purpose to their events, purpose and intention. So that starts with the whole kind of strategy piece, and then we're also doing the implementation. So we're helping the clients to plan, to look at timescales, to do event marketing, to bring in sponsors, speakers, stakeholders, suppliers, whether that's event tech or venues or printing or banners and flyers and the rest of it. But then also we're looking at how we do that sustainably moving forward as well. So there are lots of threads that come into event planning, but we feel that we are doing it from really kind of a human perspective. And we're trying to take away those stresses, those headaches of that individual and that team when it comes to putting on events.
I find that absolutely tremendous, because in my previous life, as Darren's previous life, we worked in the corporate sector. So it was a FTSE 100 company, and I worked in the brand section. So I'd support brand across external and internal. And sometimes the internal comms team would come to me and say, right, Chris, we're going to be running an event. What is it? It's AGM. Excellent. We're going to run a conference. Brilliant. We're in a sponsorship deal. Brilliant. We're doing something at the Royal Highland Show, all this kind of stuff. But the one thing that was always missing was it was somebody's job role to do one thing, but then they were taking on something that was an extension of that role. So there was the head of internal comms, then became the event planners. They then have to go and visit the hotels. They then have to figure out who was coming. They have to figure out the tech, what the presentations, the design, all this kind of stuff you mentioned. And it became a snowball of it just kept on running down a hill so fast and so quickly that the panic grew in. And
That's it.
to have somebody that, I mean, I've looked through the process of what you do, and when I read the process, I was like, wow, that's fantastic. Strategy first, plan properly. And what I found frustrating, and it was not frustrating against people in the company, it's just the lack of knowledge and understanding of what an event is and how to manage it, even the marketing side. And for me, looking at what they did was the old way of doing it. And then I don't even know how they probably would be able to navigate into the new world of doing it just now. And I see that's where you're the perfect, or your company is the perfect fit for that organisation.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So a couple of our clients, one of my clients, he works for a recruitment company, but he's also the chairman of a conference. So he's the chairman / conference director / MC. And he takes on a big role for the conference. And he's got an advisory board, global advisory board, incredible individuals, and they're brilliant as a team. And we run their annual conference for them. And he said to me, Ruby, before you came on board, I was spending 60 days of my year planning this conference.
Wow.
So if you do the maths, that's a sixth of his year planning a conference. And it just blows your mind. You know, I've had clients who've taken HR people off HR for 3 months to run the staff conference, you know, and that's so typical, Chris. Like, as you're saying, it gets taken off, it gets put onto somebody's plate or somebody's desk. And then it's their responsibility. And then you've got this growing monster where you've got time and budget and resource suddenly just all consuming. And even with the best intentions, when you're running an event as a team internally, it always spirals out of control. And so what you do when you have an events expert, I guess a bit like having any other kind of expert, is that you've got someone who's done it hundreds of times before. They understand price points when it comes to venues, or they understand the contracting side of things, or, you know, they kind of know how an event might fit into your business or your marketing strategy, again, which is where we come from, to say, look, let's be less reactive about events. So if somebody comes up to you and says, Chris, I want you to speak at this event or book a stand at our show, you kind of go back to your event strategy and see if that fits with your plans or with your budgets and the rest of it. And it's really about kind of making an event central to what a business or an organization does, because it has such an impact on everything else, that events and conferences and the like, they can't be on the outskirts or the periphery of what you're doing. They've got to be embedded with your marketing, with your business strategy, with, you know, even like campaigns and other things that you might be doing as a business, and operations, and even HR. You know, if you know you've got a big event on and you've got to take internal people off their existing roles, or you've got to bring and outsource things to people outside of the organization, it still has that impact on other operations in the business. So for me, it's fascinating, because every organization, every event's different, whether it's online or face-to-face or hybrid. And we're now kind of doing all three of those formats. And we're seeing organizations, businesses bringing different formats of events into their plan and their strategy, because, for example, they know that a webinar works at maybe the early stages of the marketing funnel and things like that. So it's really exciting to see how events are becoming more embedded in a company's strategy. But we are helping our clients to remain strategic with their events as well, and to be proactive about how they take them on, and then how an event embeds itself in a business strategy or in a company.
And you've just celebrated your 10th birthday, haven't you? So I mean, you're right when you're saying, like, you've been doing this a fair while, it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Like, what was it like? What was your background prior to that? How did you get into it?
So I got into events, Darren, I started off in hospitality. So I've got a degree in hospitality and tourism management, and I kind of wanted to go into international hotels and traveling around kind of Europe and the rest of the world, working in hotels, the kind of the kind of.
You're going to say a vlogger there, but I don't know. I don't know whether that's just something the last few years, but
I think so. I was going to say it was before my time, but it was more kind of I can't remember the names of the programs, but you saw these programs where people like jet setting and working in hotels. It's all really glam and that kind of stuff. And it wasn't the glamour for me, but it was the excitement of every day being different, every week being different. So I went down the hospitality route, working in international hotels. And then I found events when I was doing my internship quite early on. And I said to management, can I move into what was a new events department? And they were just launching because they'd refurbished the whole conference centre. They didn't have an events team. I was working in another department, saw the empty spot in the office, and they were like, yeah, events will be coming online in a couple of weeks. And it's like, can I join that team then? They were like, yeah, go for it. And that was just kind of, that carved the future career path for me, I guess. And it was from there that I thought, I can't imagine anything other than events for me. Like, this is amazing. Seeing people coming together, celebrating, or having a debate, or just all these different ways that events bring people together, really kind of resonated with me, and I wanted to be that kind of gatherer of those people. And so I went back to university, finished my degree, and then I went to central London to work for a venue, and the Royal Society of Arts, which is again an amazing place to be, because I was working with a lot of the fellows of the society, and I was working with, we had celebrities, we had royalty, but then on the other side we had corporates, we had private parties, and we were selling the venue, and it was just amazing experience. Then, as you do, I just graduated and I'd done my year in London. I'd run out of money, so I moved back to live with my parents. And I went into international exhibitions because that was one of the roles that I could do fairly locally to where my parents are. And went into international exhibitions, and then saw a different side of events again. So it was exhibitions, it was shipping, it was, all these other sort of logistical things that I'd never experienced, having worked in lovely hotels and beautiful venues. So I was seeing another side of it, and it was in publishing. So I was seeing, again, a very different sector. And it was all kind of building, because I was thinking events, when you think events traditionally, you don't think of all these different sectors that are touched by events, or conferences or academic events and all this kind of stuff that I was getting involved with. Then I left there, and then I went to manage my own region. So I was putting on events for entrepreneurs through a government body, and almost like a business gateway kind of setup. But I was managing events, or setting up partnerships. I was working with professional services, and we were putting on joint events. And it was just, again, just getting that freedom, I think, to plan and market my own events. So again, it was just building and building. And then after about 3.5 years, I thought, right, time to move up the career ladder. And I went to an agency that I'd wanted to go and work with for years. And I went there 3 months, and I got really, really sick, and it was just toxic. And it was not the working environment that I was used to, or that I wanted to be in, because it made me very, very ill in a really short space of time. I thought, this is not good. And just left there and vowed that I wouldn't go back there, but also that I couldn't see myself working for anybody again. And it was just that moment that just kind of completely changed things for me. And just mad idea, right, I'll just go and do this thing for myself and see how it goes. And I met my first client, who is still a client now, 2 weeks after I'd set up. And they said, would you event manage for us, but part-time? And I was like, yeah, I can make that work. And I was still living with my parents, sort of mid-20s, and going to the gym a lot. So I was like, oh, this is great. This kind of really fits my lifestyle. And then it snowballed again, because the word got out. Friends would say, actually, company I'm working for example, one of my friends put me into one of her employers, and they were a big charity, international charity. So we ended up doing work for them for a couple of years, everything from kind of fundraising installations down at South Bank in London to receptions for major donors in Edinburgh, and all that kind of stuff. So again, loads of really cool experience. And that whole kind of charity side of things, I hadn't really experienced that from that side before. And yeah, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And then I started to sort of niche down into that mid-tier space because I saw that there was that need. If you go sort of smaller, there isn't a requirement. If you go larger, a lot of the big corporates have events people, they have event teams, and they have teams of teams, whereas that space where we kind of plug in, typically our clients just don't have that requirement for a year-round service.
Maybe picking it up or something like that, or
that's
someone's going, "Oh, just chuck it on Zoom," but then getting a terrible feedback from it and going, "Right, we better speak to someone that actually knows what they're doing here."
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. So interestingly, we ran a webinar on Monday, just gone, for a new client, and she's from Edinburgh, but she's in the States at the moment. So we were brought on by someone that was working with her on the brand side of things, and then we helped her source digital marketing for the event, and then one of my team then came on, excuse me, and I managed the Zoom for her. So we suddenly had this kind of whole team of really experienced people delivering this fantastic service, and she didn't have to get her fingers too dirty. So it's really helping the leaders or the entrepreneurs or the directors who haven't got the time or who are actually building something and they don't want to be sidetracked with having to plan a webinar or an event. They just want to kind of give the directions. They want to sign things off, but they don't want to get involved in the event admin or the kind of nitty-gritty event planning. That's not what they're there for. So we're kind of helping them grow. They're helping us grow. So it's a nice relationship as well. So it's just every event is so different and it's brilliant.
It sounds like Darren, it sounds like you've actually, because I've noted down here, I've drawn it in a circle. I've kind of you've done the art stuff, you've done the publishing stuff, you worked with entrepreneurs, you've done the private sectors, you've worked business gateway stuff, you went the agency side, then you went to your own business, then you're starting to charity side. I mean, bloody hell, that's a lot, isn't it? That's a fantastic.
For mid-20s as well. That was that was before you went to the agency.
That's tremendous. And it's to work client side and agency side as well, because agency side is quite different. The pace is quite fast. There's a lot of demand as well. It's all about, I've noted down here, it's about budgets and strategy and the cost of things. I think that's more the private sector, but agency side, it's all about return on investment, how much money you're going to make as well. And it's amazing to hear that you've kind of said that you stepped out of that environment so quickly and you realised for yourself it's not good for your own mental health and removed yourself from that pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I kind of, although now I'm starting to build a sort of agency style model, I don't want to call ourselves an agency because I had my fingers burnt in that experience. So even though we maybe operate as an agency more now than we've ever done before, because I now have event managers who go out and deliver on my behalf, it's really something that I don't want to brand ourselves as an agency because I had such a bad experience. So we're an event management company, we're an event service or we're event specialists. And that's how we like to brand ourselves. But that all-round experience that I've had in the last sort of 19, 20 years of having a career, it's been fantastic. And I started off in retail, back when I was sort of 16, then going into the hospitality route. I think that as the entry into events is really important. And hospitality, whether it's in restaurants or venues or hotels, is really crucial because you get to understand people. And because I did that degree, it's also that it's ingrained into me, that whole customer service thing. So it's always about wowing the client or the customer, excelling those expectations. And so for me, it's really high standards for what we deliver and how we make people feel. So even in the pandemic, I wanted people to kind of feel, even when we were online, I wanted people to have a feeling, to kind of feel, whether it's an emotion or whether it was something else, but there to be a vibe and to have a feeling so that you weren't just coming into an event that was just a dead space. You were coming in online onto something and could still evoke feelings from that. So it is very much about that kind of people-to-people connection. And again, I think that's what puts me off doing the bigger corporate stuff because that's just not my style. And that's to a certain point, then it becomes almost faceless. Whereas for a lot of our clients, we are the face of their event as well. We're kind of the personalities and the smiles and the, all that kind of positive stuff. So it's about just feeding that. And it's a lot of energy, but it's also a lot of fun and it's very rewarding.
Yeah, I definitely see this is my first year in business effectively, although been, I don't want to use the word lucky. I'm not going to use the word lucky, but I've got the property business that I've built up on the side for a while. This is my first year as what I would class as an active business owner, and I'm running a couple of workshops just now, and see everything. They're just like small workshops, but even they give me so many headaches. And like my wife does some work with a training company, and to a large extent she has her clients for her. All of that stuff's managed. And I'm like, you don't need to worry about any of these headaches, like all the marketing and the like bringing people together, even the content and things like that. You have to do absolutely everything. So yeah, this year's been a rude awakening for me. But I completely, when you look at that and scale that up into kind of mid-tier size businesses, I guess where you're operating, that is you logistically, the number of things that you've got to kind of bring together, let alone the people you've got to bring together. But coming back to what you said right at the start, making it at the central part of the strategy, as opposed to, it's just an event that kind of tags on to the side of things almost as an afterthought. It's like, no, actually, how can it sit as a central piece of whatever strategy that business is working on?
Definitely. And I think also some of that, Darren, is that it then, I don't know if justification is the right word, but it almost kind of justifies to whether it's a financial controller or an FD or someone that event is really central and important. Whereas if event planning is just kind of on the outskirts of something, it's easy to ditch if things get tough. And so if something's so integral to a business, then it's harder then for it to be removed. And so if you're having to get approvals, whether it's budgetary or otherwise, it's then really important for that event to be embedded in the middle of everything, because then it's harder to get rid of it, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. And actually, I love when you're talking around, even during the pandemic, you wanted people to feel something, that little bit of joy, if you like. Because I've seen I think it was one of the videos I watched with you and somebody else, you talk about immersive versus educational content as well. Do you want them to be educated? So they're sitting there, do you want them to join in? And I think that's a key part as well, because there's been a lot of training, I'm sure we've been on, our events we've all been on, either in person or actually digital, where they do have a point where you start to shut off because you feel tired, you're not as engaged. And that must be quite hard in the digital world when you've got that hybrid event, but you've obviously, I guess you've conquered that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, because I think what sort of happens, what I've started to notice, and again, I think that's to do with the size of events that we run or the types of clients and the size of clients that we work with, is that we want people to be engaged with that event. We don't want them switching off. And as you say, people are switching off because they're not engaged, they're not involved. So that whole kind of participation piece is so integral, because if I'm sat here and I'm just a passive viewer, I'm not feeling valued. Whereas if I'm being engaged into a conversation, or if I'm getting taken from a plenary into a networking, into then I'm excited by it, I'm engaged, I'm involved. But if I'm not feeling valued because it's just passive and there's no effort in the agenda, or it's just you're being spoken at for 45 minutes online, which is hard enough. It's 45 minutes in a room, but 45 minutes online feels like forever. So my thing is really about having for people to feel valued when they're engaging with these events, that they feel visible. I'm seen. I'm kind of I'm a part of this event, and I feel that I'm valued. So again, it's all that kind of making people feel part of something where they're comfortable to share ideas, or they're comfortable to open up, or they're kind of in that deeper level of interaction, I think, than just being a passive viewer of something. And I think passive viewing is also, it has its place. There are webinars and things where it is just very much passive viewing and you're not very involved. But the sorts of things that we've tried to create, or the experiences we've tried to create, is that even if you are in a webinar, we'll have tools, or we'll do things to make people feel that we see you, you're valued, thank you for your time, we want you to be a part of this thing. So that's where I think that when you start looking at the bigger events as well, online or in a room, is that when you get to 300, 400, 500, then that starts to get a little bit lost, because it is difficult then to keep that connection. But for me, it's all about making people feel valued, even if they are one of 1,000 people in an exhibition or a big conference. But it is harder to do when the numbers go up.
Yeah, it's something, I don't know whether you're aware of this one, but it was new to me. I signed up to it because I read a book by the author, and his name escapes me now. It's Sam someone. Chris will maybe know him. But it's uncertainty experts. Sam Conniff actually is his name. He's like he has this concept. He wrote a book a few years ago around Be More Pirate. But he had this like quite. I just signed up to it because I thought I follow him and I thought that like sound quite cool. And it was like it classed as a hybrid event. So this is just something that's just finished. But he was kind of running it live. There was different times you could sign up for. But when you're talking about even just the active thing, it was like you'd scan a QR code on your laptop and then you'd be asking questions and he'd be pausing, allowing you to reflect and not only that, but it was like he would pause and say, so thanks for joining us. So I can see you, Darren, I can see you, Joey, I can see, you know, and it was just even that, the fact that you're talking about being seen, that's what I felt like. And I suppose I never really recognized why I enjoyed it until you're kind of calling out that you know, element of your, even though it was just 3-hour sessions over 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So an hour, it was like, and it split up quite a lot. There wasn't that kind of normal fatigue that you got on a normal hour Zoom call, for example, where you like switched off after 10 minutes of being spoken to, because it was maybe mixed up in so many ways, but also you felt like you were there almost because you were either you were conscious that it was live.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think I haven't heard of him, Darren, but that's clearly intentional. You know, that's been done on purpose. There's that intention that he's giving you that chance to interact. He's taking the time and he's built that time into the program to acknowledge the people that are interacting and say, you know, I see you, I hear you, blah blah blah. So it's really, it's all in the design. I think a big key when it comes to face-to-face, hybrid or virtual, and I can talk about hybrid later, but it's all about kind of designing something that is very, very intentional and purposeful. Yeah. So if, for example, my client's event on Monday, she from the start said, I don't want this to be longer than a 40-minute webinar. That was it. You know, and there were 4 panelists and they could all speak forever, you know, but it was very much, I want this to be short, sharp, focused, targeted. You know, we had everything kind of structured and everybody had been briefed and that was it. I just want this to be a very, very brief webinar. And the great thing is if you have a short event where you leave people wanting more, then you've done your job really, because the worst thing is, Darren, like you say, you know, as you've said, Chris, you just switch off, and even easier done online, you just press a button and off you go. So it's not even having to make your excuses.
Don't want to see someone like here in the door slam at the way out. Who's that? Yeah. I mean, I've seen it done really badly over, and like it's making me reflect just even thinking of it. This is why I stopped at the start of you know, we all done these quizzes, these Zoom quizzes with our mates as soon as the pandemic hit. You know, in the proper education or networking world, everything went online, but it was just a Zoom with a slideshow with a speaker, and I don't think there was much thought in terms of like what you're saying. How would you try and design this as interactive as possible or as engaging as possible as an event? Maybe because the thought hadn't been there even when it was face to face. Maybe harsh to say, but and therefore that just translated online, but then it was even more diluted than that face-to-face sort of presence. So
yeah, I think I've seen some of that, Darren, as well, is that I've seen that a lot of events that were kind of, you know, wishy-washy face-to-face have actually kind of disappeared because people just haven't got the motivation to go out to events like that, or the organizers suddenly looked at their events and gone, actually, you know what, I don't think our events were really that successful because of, you know, whatever. So I'm hopeful that the reopening of events doesn't mean that a lot of those events that didn't really do anything come back, because people are thinking about where they're spending their time and they're thinking about the commitments that they make. We were having that conversation just at the start of the webinar about, you know, joining networking or joining accountability or joining groups and memberships, is that you almost kind of overcommit yourself sometimes, and then you've got work to deliver and you've got a life to have and a family. So it's really important that the things that we do go out to are worth that time, or even if we're joining online, you know, it's worth my while that I join it online, because otherwise I can just exit and off I go, you know, I jump out the screen and then I just carry on with my work. So it's about giving people a reason to interact with your event, or making your event completely unmissable, giving people that kind of FOMO that if I don't go to this thing, I'm really going to miss out. And it's creating something that people want to attend, or they see the value of it, because they know they're going to be valued by attending it. And it's just about kind of keeping events really human. I think there's a lot of stuff that, you know, I just can't do because it's just against my, you know, I just think, oh, I can't do it. It just doesn't achieve anything, you know, and I'm always saying to clients, what's the purpose behind this? What's the intention? What's the strategy, right? There isn't a strategy, let's create one. And then that means that you're kind of less reactive to other requests or new requests, and you've got this event or this conference or this calendar planned into the activities for your organization for the year or for the quarter or whatever. But it's not to say you can't be flexible, and if something really enticing comes in, you jump at the chance, but it's just making sure it's aligned.
I think that's all really useful, actually. And for everyone listening, that's a lot of information to take on board, which is fantastic. And even looking at doing a bit of research on your website, and I really liked how you've mapped out your 7-stage process. It's so simple. I mean, are you able to kind of walk us through that 7-stage process, or what you kind of do, if you like, just for people to take away now?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about, Chris, what I said, to start with that kind of strategy and that intention around what either your one event, and you might have one event a year, you might have an annual conference, or you might have a calendar of events, which now could be virtual or face-to-face or even hybrid. And that intention that this is what these events will do, this is the strategy behind these types of events. Your webinars might achieve something very different to your corporate dinner, because they should have very, very different objectives. So it's about starting with a strategy, making sure it's aligned with your marketing and your business strategy, and then from there building something out that serves your business or serves your purpose. And then from there, we then help our clients to implement that strategy. And so we will look at, for example, the calendar for the year, right? Okay, so we've got 4 webinars to run, we've got 1 conference, we've got 2 dinners or something, for example. So then we start to kind of look at the team and how we resource that and budgets, and then we might start to bring in, you know, ideas around kind of sponsorship or revenue generation, or however we're gonna fund an event. And then sometimes that could be ticket fees or, you know, other kind of arrangements. So then we're doing things, say, for example, ticket fees, and that takes you down the route of payment processing, registration pages, you know, websites, all that kind of thing. So again, we'll implement that through our team of partners. So again, we don't claim to be able to do everything. We will bring in partners that will then design a website or design marketing material, or do the digital marketing campaigns and that kind of thing, if the client doesn't already have the internal team to do that. And if they do, then we just work with the internal in-house people to deliver. And then we'll help a client to book, whether it's a physical venue or the event technology, whether it's platforms, or, I mean, sometimes, you know, say to clients, look, don't overcomplicate it. Zoom or Teams is fine. We can do this in Zoom or Teams, and it's familiar and it's inexpensive. So again, then we're just looking at kind of what we need to do to get the right people and the right number in the room, whether it's a physical room or an online room. And then we'll just work towards the event. We almost kind of set a date and then reverse engineer all the things that need to come into place in marketing, social media, you know, print, design, brand, whatever, and work with the relevant in-house team or the outsourced specialist to then deliver what the client wants. But there's a lot of hand-holding, there's a lot of energy that goes into the events. There's a lot of giving them, you know, our advice. They ask for opinions. They might have other specialists or other consultants they bring in along the way. So we may sit down with them and go through ideas with them. So it's a very kind of collaborative approach. And I think that's the way it should be, because then that's how you get buy-in from the in-house team and potentially the external team as well. So that process is really, you know, it can be bespoke for clients, because some clients want things done very, very differently. And then we're working across a couple of different sectors. So again, we're mindful of sectors, you know, whether it's professional services or it's consulting or something else. Again, even things like adoption of technology, you know, for example, you look at public sector, and sometimes they might be more willing to get together physically. So then we start looking at the options of, right, okay, they want to get together in person, face to face, right? How do we facilitate that and make that happen? But the other thing I kind of wanted to say, I mentioned it earlier, was the whole kind of hybrid thing.
Yeah.
Is a lot of people sort of say, well, what is hybrid? What does it look like? And all this sort of thing. And I think hybrid is taking its time to kind of come on board. And it's definitely a lot slower than I expected. I kind of thought there'd be a lot more hybrid events going on, but I think that there's a real people get the online and people get the in the room physical event, and then the marriage of those two is what can be quite technical. It can be confusing, but it can also be expensive. So I think with the opening up of events, a lot of people have just been fairly happy to go, this event is 100% in person. We're not filming it, we're not streaming it. This is it. And it's all kind of leading back again to that, this, intention. And the intention is it's going to be an in-person event, that's it. Or the intention is it's going to be an in-person event and we're going to film these sessions and then we'll live stream them. So that technically isn't really hybrid. Hybrid is very much having a physical event and an online event happening simultaneously, but there's a lot more interaction and stuff going on. So I think there's something to be said about that, but we get the whole Zoom Teams events, we get the whole in-person events, and hybrid is something that's still very, very new, but I think it will develop. I think moving into 2022, people may see more traction in hybrid, but at the moment it's been a bit slower than expected, which, is understandable.
Why do you think that is, Ruby? Do you think that there's still because there's part of rationale kind of coming out of lockdown, I'd be thinking venues are going to be lower in numbers, therefore less people can attend, therefore there's more of a case to be made for people having to participate virtually.
Yeah,
that doesn't seem to, that I guess that's how my brain's kind of formulating that, but that doesn't seem to have kind of worked its way through to a hybrid event kind of coming through. Is that just because they're not talking to you, or I guess people in that industry and they're kind of just seeing it as one or other, like it can't be both?
I think there's a little bit of that. I think people have got to the stage where they're comfortable with Zoom and Teams and even different platforms online, and they're like, I get that. Usually I'll click on a button and an app will open up, or a browser, and I've got to create a profile, and then so I'd go and do X, Y, and Z. So I think people have got that understanding of the online events, but with hybrid, I think it's kind of trickling down, and I'm seeing sort of a few more hybrid events happening now, but it's I think making its way into this space has been slower than I expected, into the space that we operate, the whole kind of mid-tier space. I've seen corporates use hybrid and use it well, but again, expense is, it's a big thing. It's a big commitment to run a hybrid event, because you need so much in terms of technology. And if you want interactions between people online and in person, that's extra kit, that's extra crew, that's extra cost. So again, I think because of the timings and the way things have happened with the pandemic and then opening up of restrictions, people have been just quite happy to go and do something face to face, or those who aren't comfortable with it are going, well, actually, I'll just watch a live stream and, I'm good with that. And then the whole kind of bringing it together, that I don't think that gap has widened just yet has narrowed yet in our space. And potentially, I think it might. I think it will, particularly in light of where we are right now. And, we heard about some more restrictions coming in yesterday. So I think it will evolve, but it's all very new. I think the thing with hybrid is it's new. It can be costly if you want a lot of interactions, and quite a lot of us are just quite happy to go out and meet people in a room if we possibly can.
Yeah.
So there's that. But then on the flip side, you've got people who are going, well, I'll just watch the recording. If I can't make it, or I choose not to go to a physical venue, I'm quite happy to just watch a recording afterwards.
I think it's so much to be like the kind of early adopter kind of concept, the early adopter stage, where just now everyone was so skeptical about the Zoom, especially when you've seen Zooms getting hacked and all this, and they've got the extra security measures. And then the late adopters eventually came on board, and then the early adopters just now, the hybrids, are probably going, this is fantastic. These are probably the more tech companies that are really out there with kind of long working. So I use Miro. Do you know Miro for working? Yeah. So I use Miro boards for working with clients as well. But again, that's taking me a bit of time. But I think it will take time for people to anticipate how good this is, and then they have to see it working well. They may even have to be part of a session to then bring it on board. And that's sometimes the downside of it all. They need somebody like yourself who maybe is an iPhone 4 user, but yeah, as an early adopter with this kind of stuff to lead the charge. Because I'm amazed that I was talking to a client recently, and they work in the public sector, and they were running an event through Eventbrite, and because they had to partner up with one of the public sector people, they had to do it through Teams. But they wanted to do it all recorded, easy through Zoom, but they had to use Teams. But then they found out Eventbrite and Teams aren't as compatible as they should be. So they had to run two separate things to make it as one. Really bizarre and complex, but they only found this out 2 hours before they were running the event.
Dear.
So again, I'm listening to this, and then I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, oh my God, there's a conversation I need to try and have with you and these guys, because the amount of pain they go through, it's about removing that pain, I guess, as well.
It is, it is painful. Like you say, it's exactly that. It's painful. And I spoke to someone else yesterday who was saying that they had an event in Teams. Well, they weren't hosting it, they were attending it. And similar issues with email addresses not matching up to the people that had been invited, or if you were outside of the organization, you couldn't get in, even if you were working with them. So these are the things that if you're working with someone who understands the systems and has a process, you would already check as part of your contingencies. So there is that piece. And I think, again, going back to the question, Chris, about hybrid, is that with hybrid, because things were, I think it was April, wasn't it, that we kind of opened things up slowly, and then we got into summer. So hybrid hasn't really had chance to kind of take off, because there's been lots of stop and start with hybrid. And I think, as you say, there are tech companies, there are different sectors that are already adopting it. But because we do have to be mindful of sectors, like I said earlier about public sector as well, that they're sort of happier meeting face to face, and certain sectors are a bit more traditional. So you have to be mindful of the sectors that you're operating in as well, just to understand kind of, what that group of people is thinking, or how they behave. So it's again, these are all the things that we kind of recognize and we discuss and we look at when we're looking at process when it comes to events. But I'm really passionate. My kind of purpose is around kind of making people understand that they have to think about their events. You have to be 100% about events. You can't be wishy-washy about them, because they take so much out of you. They take time, they take energy, they take effort, and they're exhausting. So if you're going to run an event, you may as well run it well, because if you have to put as much effort in when you do it well, as maybe, a terrible event. So actually, try to make your event as good as you possibly can, because you're going to be exhausted either way. So get the advice, get the help, and fingers crossed it'll come off. But
it's the pressure as well. You imagine, like, almost working with, I guess, someone like yourself with that background and experience. You're like, I don't think it would be as much energy, because all the negative energy around, like, pressure of getting it wrong and like 2 hours before, could like, if you could kind of conceivably capture like how much stress that would put on them, like figuring that sort of stuff. I rocked up a property one, but this would have been about a month, 6 weeks ago or something like that. It was the first one. It was a new launch, back in the room. It turned up into the speakers couldn't connect to the projector, and you're like, that. I mean, that's stuff that like absolutely should be bread and butter. Like, at least turn up like a bit, like get a bit earlier. But just that pressure of not getting it right, like you say, like, what's that worth to you? I guess that would be a great question. It's like, how valuable is it to you to get this right and get it brilliantly? And maybe that's where a lot of people just don't maybe recognize it, or are quite happy sucking up that pain and pressure. But it's a big thing. You're absolutely right, Darren. It's such a big thing, and it's your reputation, it's your brand, and if you're a partner of an event that goes wrong, it's your reputation, your brand, and your relationship with that organization as well. So there is a lot at stake when you're running and planning events. So all those eventualities, yes, there's always going to be something that goes wrong. But all those eventualities, contingency planning, again, we've got an event, a hybrid conference actually in February, but we're already, because of our lessons from last year, where my client was, he was going for hybrid, and then we had the Christmas shutdown, then we had about a month to flip everything around, which was really stressful. So this year he's gone, right, I know I've got to plan my contingency for virtual if hybrid can't happen. So
it's taking lessons from what you've done before, but it's also about having somebody who knows what they're doing, who understands the pressures, who can take the pressures and juggle multiple projects. So imagine we've got multiple projects going on at the same time at different stages, and they can be physical conferences that, we've got webinars, we've got lots of projects on at the same time. So if you take the stress of all those different events and all that stress that we're taking away from the client, actually that's, if you put that on a weighing scale, that's a heck of a lot.
That's a lot. That allows it to, apart from anything else, it allows them to focus on what it is that they're in business for, which this will be a part of it, but it's a part that is not likely to be their skill set. Like Chris says, we said this when we were in corporate. It's a large corporate, but other areas within the business, let's say, and the business which shall remain nameless, but probably people can guess. But it used to joke that we'd have an annual sales conference and it would take 4 months for the whole team and area to kind of manage, and that was the PA kind of organising it, all the leaders, senior leadership team, recording videos, but it was all kind of, it was very kind of felt like time intensive for everyone like involved and quite pressured. But I mean, the events were fantastic, actually, like delivered. But I think the pressures, could have been taken away from actually the day-to-day running of the business and activity for a lot of the leaders. So
definitely, definitely. That's what we're hoping that our service kind of gives people, is that that space to kind of do what they're there to do. They're not there to be event planners, and so taking that off. I think
it also keeps them, though, if you're being asked a question. Like, and someone keeps you at your central thread, it's a lot more purposeful, keeping it center of your strategy and thing. When you're getting clouded, it's like, you're firefighting over here because something's gone wrong in the business, or you're dealing with some difficult decisions to be made in the business, and then you've got this event that you're planning. If you're trying to you throw that on top, it's easy for you to just go, we'll just make decisions, because you get decision fatigue, and you end up making poorer decisions and not actually checking in with yourself. Actually, is this the direction that we need to actually go for this event? So
exactly.
So sorry.
No, absolutely. No, don't worry about it. It's definitely that. Like you say, if you're so focused on kind of the tangents that get thrown at you from running or planning this event, it's easy then for it to unravel and for it to become a very different kind of event from what you set it out to be. And I think the second thing is that kind of that kind of negativity, or the almost kind of the toxicity of an event stress, can then feed into the wider team and say, like, you're saying PA was involved and so-and-so's involved and all these people are involved. And then suddenly it's just become something very different from what it was meant to be initially. So we make sure that those events stay on point, and they stay on brand, and they stay on, kind of the intention that we had at the start. And actually, if things need to be changed and amended as you go through the process, then absolutely they will. But it's all about making sure that that event stays true to what either it was meant to be if it's a new event, or it's familiar in some kind of way if it's a historic event. And so it's striking a balance, but it's I think there's a lot more to events that people realize. And so I think I'm kind of trying my hardest to kind of get people to think about events in that way, because events are, speaking opportunities, they're sponsorship opportunities, they're a stand at a show, they're so many of these things, and we don't recognize them as events sometimes. Or if we're running or planning an event or hosting an event, then we might need budget from marketing, we might need budget from digital, we might need, all these other resources or budgets or access. And so that's why I'm sort of saying, you've got to make sure you've got the buy-in from as wide a team as you can, but also that event is still purposeful, it's still intentional, and it delivers on what it was meant to deliver on in the first place, so that it's similar or the same as to what it was when you started that process. Because stress and pressure and all that negativity is never good. And you want people to enjoy the event at the end of the day.
And you're taking all of this with such, you always come across with such positive energy. You've always got a smile on your face as well. So you're absorbing all of that stress and just going, we've got you.
Yeah, totally.
I just want to ask one thing, actually, because I always love when I see people inspired by something else that somebody else does. And I was checking out the Instagram feed that you've got, and obviously it's quite a long feed because you've gone into a long time, which is fantastic. But there's a couple of things actually. But one I want to talk around was I loved the Park Regis piece that you put out, which was fantastic, the Birmingham Hotel. And I don't know if you explain to our listeners about that, because I could see you were inspired by that as well, about that immersive experience you received.
Yeah, so that, I think it's always good to call out people that are doing something different or disruptive or memorable, or I just like things being different. So if you come to one of my events, Chris, I'll always pick, a unique venue, or I'll pick something a bit different, because I like that whole kind of standing out from the crowd thing. Yeah. And what I loved about what the Park Regis did with their virtual tour is that whether there's a restriction placed on me, or whether I choose not to go, or I'm in Scotland like you guys, and Birmingham is a couple hundred miles away, and I would never have got to see that hotel had it not been for this innovative virtual tour that they did. So I shared that on my social media because I thought it was such an immersive experience. It was a box arrived a couple of days before the virtual tour, which was done through a platform as opposed to Zoom or Teams. It was a specialist platform. Click on a browser, opens up, and then you get this virtual tour. But this box arrived and there was all this stuff in it. And I was quite good. I didn't open it because normally I would be really nosy and I'd just go through it. But I thought, I'm not going to touch it. I'll leave it. Everybody in the house given instructions, don't touch that box. Came to the day of the tour and I sit down, open up the box. And I still got it here on my desk. There's a water bottle. There was a couple of goodies. There's a jar there with jelly beans in it. Guess how many jelly beans in the jar, kind of stuff. But then the other things that I did that was really clever was there was a fragrance stick. And as the tour opened, she said, open up the fragrance stick. That's the smell, the scent that you would smell when you walk into the lobby of the hotel. So it's just like really simple, subtle, clever things that you'd never think about yourself, but somebody's doing this and in such an impactful way. And then at the next stage, it was something else. And then it was, and this is where you'll get a bottle of this or a packet of these luxury chocolates or whatever, so you kind of go through the tour and you're just given these prompts and just so clever, just so well done. And I thought, I've got to share this because I love that innovation, that kind of people doing things a bit differently is really cool, especially in our industry, because I got to experience in a hotel without even leaving my desk. And consequently, that's on my radar for when I travel down south. But I had some friends stay there recently and this was fantastic. And, so all of a sudden that whole kind of virality, I guess, of that virtual tour has meant that suddenly this hotel's on the radar for so many people now. So I love that. Yeah. So I had to share that. That was really cool.
Love that. One other thing I just want to pull out, which before we're going to wrapping up, is that I loved as well. I was going through the school feed and I seen it in July 2019, right before the pandemic and all this kind of stuff. You're reading High Performance Habits.
I was, yeah.
Fantastic. What is on the reading list for this little break? Have you got one lined up for this break? Because obviously that was perfect timing for when the pandemic hit to have that kind of book in your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, honestly, Chris, I have got books in every room of the house, and I'm struggling to find time to read at the moment, just because things opening up, so much going on, lots of meetings, lots of really positive stuff. I've got 2 young kids, so trying to find and carve that time to sit down with a book has been really difficult. But I think at the moment I've got like 4 or 5 books on the go. So I'm reading The Automatic Millionaire. I'm reading Personal MBA, which is more like almost like a workbook. It's amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. I've got Rebel ID.
Is it? No, I'm not sure. It's Tropical MBA, I think it is.
Okay. This is brilliant, Darren. You've got to get your hands on this one. Personal MBA, really, really good. And then upstairs, next to my bed, I've got Oversubscribed by Daniel Priestley, who wrote Key Person of Influence. And every night I say to myself, I'm going to read it, and I just fall asleep because I'm so exhausted. And then I've also got Rebel Ideas by Matthew Side, who wrote Black Box Thinking. So I've been reading some of that. And I've got books here as well. So I'm terrible because I'll pick up a book and then I'll start reading it and then I'll never finish it.
That's my wife all over as well, actually. It's like there's so many of them sitting around the house. I'm like, one of these days she'll finish one. But...
Yeah, one day. But I do love to read, and my journey sort of through the pandemic has, and in fact it started just before the pandemic, was sort of a personal development journey. And then it fast forwarded through the pandemic, which has been great for the business as well as for me. So yeah, I do love to read.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Ruby, and I guess hearing a bit more about that. And I think, like, if there's anyone out there, I guess, that would be looking to get in touch with you, how can they do it?
Yeah, so best place to go is either my website or LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. So you'll just find me as Ruby Sweeney on LinkedIn, and the website is theeventshub.com. But LinkedIn's great because I can get conversations going, and I'm always up for a chat on LinkedIn. So you can find me there.
Good stuff. And listen, before we let you go, what's your thoughts on the phrase, obviously the podcast, purpose over profit? What's your what does that phrase mean to you?
Well, I use the word purpose quite a lot, I think, during that podcast, Darren. So purpose is massive for me, I think. And when I started the business, when I've worked in events, it's always been about that purpose of bringing people together, that intention that I want people to come together and to have these great experiences. So the phrase purpose over profit has always been close to my heart, just, by coincidence. Because for me, it's never been about running business to make lots of profit. It's about having those experiences, those connections, those relationships. And that for me, it kind of underpins purpose, really. It's like I said, the human connection. So what you guys are doing here is great. I love your podcasts, and I'm definitely going to be following a lot more in the new year and seeing who you've got on. So yeah.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you saying that, Ruby. And nice talking to you.
You too. Thanks, Darren. Cheers, Chris.
Take care.
You too.
As always, thank you so much for listening to the Pop Pod this week. If you'd like to leave a review or share the podcast with others, then that'd be awesome. You'll find us on Instagram at the Pop Pod, and on Facebook we have a community group called Purpose to Progress that anyone can join. And we'll be back every Monday with a new episode, but until then, stay on purpose and we'll see you next week.